Ordinarily, if a very bitter um, enemy claiming war debts showed up in time and hammered together a scaffold and announced that the judge and jury in the trial was in their head. Although most people would recognize the truth of that sentiment, few would honor it. There's a slight difference when the criminals and the psychopaths have the sanction of the Beatles and the Lennons. So this tape is necessary. When you look at what exactly took place, I was a very small child when Martin Luther King reached the end of his career. But one of the things that came out during the movement, despite the fact that white liberals were always advocating for Black people, trying to um, legalize busing to better schools, teach tolerance and integration, um, advocate for special attention to Black causes and Black issues, publish Black arts and literature, while the crazy racists were turning over cars, vowing segregation forever. There was still a huge number of disgruntled Black people who didn't appreciate white liberals and saw the hostility of the KKK as identifying them correctly as a common enemy. This is legendary. Marcus Garvey used to meet with the Ku Klux Klan. Louis Farrakhan has advocated for separation of the races. We have this notorious horror show coming from Seattle's Green Party, which led to Two Virgins' Pussy Ball. Whatever. The progenitors of this come together, bumper sticker. Were people like Leon deGrasse. Leon deGrasse was an altar boy of the Catholic Church. He was the World War II generation's Martin Sheen. He stood up for the Catholic Church and Weezo and all of that while advocating for Adolf Hitler's movement and joining and serving in Adolf Hitler's army, a parochial assassin. So what you know about these burglars of the moral dimension setting up their scaffold and announcing bang, 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 judge and jury in Peter Gabriel's head, is that, for one thing, they're free to invent anything they want. They just poof, smoke, magic acts, make up stories, laws, tell any fable, and back it up with media power to do libel. So another thing we know about them is you can't successfully argue with them because the judge and jury in their head has already picked you off for an assassination object. So getting you to argue with them is all the more fun. It's insight garnered from the royal class reading Ayn Rand, who said that the most terrible thing is to be reasoning with a rabid animal. That's the most terrible thing of all. And they laughed and said, can do. And that's what it is, trying to reason with Peter Gabriel. He's just a rabid animal. There's no stopping him. No outrage has ever even shined a light on the other side of his Mirror Master war game as representative of the media army, promoting their fantasy, their double fantasy, their switcheroo to normal legal processes. Normal legal processes don't exist in the United States. I've written to magistrates, I've written to magazines, I've written to teachers, I've talked to friends, I've talked to police, and nobody has a word to say about what this vicious Dracula has done and is doing, and by all measures is likely to continue doing. So, how did Martin Sheen circle me in the city of Pittsburgh as a point of interest? Because Deborah Martin contacted me to Granger Morgan's facility at David Demarest's office with Rob Pfeiffer and a bunch of clowniacs. And they had made up their mind. They weren't going to look at anything like evidence. They weren't going to look at neurological injuries. They weren't going to look at horror torture. Let me tell you something that's difficult to understand. All my life, I have been mocked by people who know how intelligent I either am or appear to be because I don't get some things. Now, one of the reasons I don't get things is because I'm deaf. And I'm as impatient as anybody else. So they use my impatience to justify their own, which may seem legitimate, but not when consciously and deliberately withholding deaf education for the purpose of doing that, of having the upper hand. These were rivals in academics who purposefully deafened me so I wouldn't be conscious and aware of what was going on a lot of the time. Now, people will look at what my hero, Jeannie, a deaf girl with Down syndrome, epilepsy, who was royally punished for it, taught me sign language and got me successfully through college. I made Psi Beta, Phi Theta Kappa, and people will be under the illusion, see, he's how smart he is. But a lot of it took a Mennonite interpreter who was attentive to when I missed things, could tell I had missed things. Now I'm a late deafened adult, which means that when it comes to care assessment, there's a lot of abandonment and turnover in care assessors. So each and every time a care assessor has to be advised that I'm late deafened and sign language is hard for me, which means that things don't get through. They have to be patient to explain things to me. They're not going to do that. State of Washington and Seattle are just going to look at it as another way to get me for people like Deborah Martin, who hold the upper hand in Seattle because of their affiliation with the Green Party. Now, it may seem strange, but I actually identified Andrea Swimmer, the Neva Corporation agent that was put on me by the NAACP at Taylor Alderdice High School for their partnership with Gail Burston in the script and snuff film outrage that claimed the life of Susan Kennedy. As a woman who was being abused, I wanted to try to help her. She stood by and laughed when I was battered senseless, when I vomited out a window endlessly at the age of 13, nearly fatally poisoned by her lover, who was an adult. She was older than me. She never reciprocated because Eric and Claire and Martin Alderman and the little giggle gaggle of um, museum thieves around Shulman, like Brian Milnes and Jaime Carbonell, had implanted memories for the Yoko Ono's revenge attack. And they had identified her as the sales lady. She was an actress for a Neva pornographic law firm. Okay, so she was, you get to play the fallen woman and we'll make you the hero. And this was where Debbie Martin was coming from. So Martin Sheen, Deborah Martin, and Vince Irene had it all figured out how they were going to torture and then ignore that they had tortured a little deaf child and then make him the brunt of their war game and come swooping down with Penis Gabriel and the royal family saying, "Oh, London has been violated," which is ridiculous. It can only come from the incredible scene that produced Godspell at Carnegie Mellon University and Hair at Carnegie Mellon University. Their attorney for Neva Pornographic worked with Hair. They set up a pornographic genocide program, and everybody's shy of saying that. So they go with the scaffold that was built by the royal enemy from Japan, who was set up to do this by John Lennon's revolution. So when you look at Penis Gabriel and his Draculas, I mean, I had to move an image of John Kennedy by Greta because they would go, "Oh, we can point backwards in time and say, see, he triggered our Swami Nostra. He triggered our Swami Nostra." Well, they set me up, Roger Waters and his fans, in British screwdriver um, circuits, set me up as the walrus, man, so they could just pan any story they wanted on me. While they took me down with Zala. Zala is this thing that came out of Africa during that. Everybody spits on this guy, so he's covered with spit. And you're supposed to think, "Oh, wow, that's progressive. That's Green Party progressive." Deborah Martin's like, "You don't understand the effervescent shyness of Latinas picking grapes if you don't wow yourself before the shyness." I mean, and they made up their story and circumvented all normal processes. Peter Shell's tape running the night I regurgitated their implant overdub. I mean, one of the people involved was Ming-No Wen. She does overdub voices for Disney. And they extruded, that was their word, their impingement on the persona. That was their phrase. Um, Peter Shell was, drumming for overthrow of the United States and so on. This was an illegal tape. And they ran it through a computer of a man named Jaime Carbonell, who is an expert in mistranslations, and sell it to the Russians. And Fripperton comes running with his Royal Orthodox Church uh, hocus pocus for Gurdjieff, and says this is Ouspensky of the soul, the white liberal, while they're running reckless driving incidents at Kelly Elementary, which could have killed people, and stealing books from the museum. The wild dungeon that Tom O'Connor, who owned that van, knows who the driver was ironclad for the sale of exotic books for Shulman. I'm absolutely sure of it. Now, I slipped the Wilkinsburg Police Department something Will Zell had written that confirmed the entire miasma of how that they operated with King Crimson. And nobody investigated. Not one single person investigated because of these Leon DeGrasse like Martin Sheen and Vince Irene and their circuit, all with the behemoth of the NAACP. We hate the white liberal, man. We hate the white liberal. Oh, the fallen woman of the Neva Corporation is the victim. We know this. We know this from our astral shimish of the symbolic majesty of the mosaic of the Green Party.